The morning sun shone bright over New Haven Colony. Golden wheat fields stretched as far as the eye could see. The air smelled sweet with the scent of growing crops. This was a good place to live, a peaceful place where families could raise their children without fear. Lucy Martinez ran through the tall wheat, her small hands brushing against the golden stalks. She was 8 years old, with dark hair that bounced as she moved, and bright brown eyes full of wonder. Her mother Maria called from the farmhouse porch, telling her not to go too far from home. Lucy waved back and kept running, pretending she was flying like the birds overhead. The Martinez family had been on New Haven for 3 years now. Carlos, Lucy's father, worked hard in the fields every day. Maria took care of their small home and helped other families with their children. They had come here from Earth looking for a better life, a place where Lucy could grow up safe and happy. Captain Jake Sullivan walked down the main street of New Haven's small town center. He was in charge of the colony's defense force, though there was not much to defend against. New Haven was far from the busy trade routes. Pirates rarely came this way, and the local wildlife was mostly harmless. The biggest problems Jake usually dealt with were broken farming equipment and the occasional disagreement between neighbors. Jake was a big man with gray hair and kind eyes. He had served in the Earth military for 20 years before coming to New Haven. He liked the quiet life here, but he never forgot his duty to protect the colonists. He carried a basic plasma rifle and wore simple body armor, more for show than anything else. The colonists trusted Jake completely. When children saw him walking around town, they would wave and smile. He knew everyone by name and always had time to help with small problems. New Haven felt like the safest place in the galaxy. That morning started like any other. Farmers went to their fields. Children played in the streets. The local market was busy with people buying food and supplies. No one expected visitors. New Haven rarely had visitors. Then the sky changed. Lucy was still running through the wheat when she heard the deep rumbling sound. She stopped and looked up, shading her eyes with her small hand. Dark shapes were moving across the blue sky, getting bigger and bigger. Ships, big ships she had never seen before. The ships were not like the simple transport vessels that sometimes brought supplies to New Haven. These were sleek and dangerous, looking with sharp edges and dark metal that seemed to eat light. Strange markings covered their hulls, symbols that hurt to look at. Jake heard the rumbling too. He grabbed his radio and called to his small team of security officers. Unknown ships approaching the colony. All units report to the landing field. Immediately. His voice was calm, but his heart was beating fast. In 20 years of military service, he had learned to recognize warships when he saw them. The ships landed with a thunderous roar that shook the ground. Dust and debris flew everywhere as the powerful engines touched down on the colony's small landing field. The ships were even more frightening up close, at least 3 times bigger than anything that had ever visited New Haven. Jake arrived at the landing field with his 5 security officers. They looked very small next to the alien warships. The ships had no windows that Jake could see, just smooth dark metal and those strange, painful symbols. A hatch opened on the largest ship with a hissing sound. Creatures walked out that Jake had only seen in military briefings. Zephyrians. They were tall, maybe 7 feet, with scaly green-gray skin and yellow eyes that seemed to look right through a person. They wore black armor that covered most of their bodies and carried weapons that hummed with deadly energy. The lead Zephyrian was bigger than the others, with darker scales and more ornate armor. Jake knew this had to be their commander. The creature looked at Jake and his men like they were insects that had crawled out from under a rock. "I am Lord Commander Vextar of the Zephyrian Empire," the alien said. His voice was cold and rough, like grinding stone. "You will provide tribute records and colony production reports immediately." Jake stepped forward, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'm Captain Jake Sullivan, head of colony security. We've paid all required tributes according to galactic law. Our records are complete and up to date." Vexitar made a sound that might have been laughter, but there was no humor in it. "Humans think they understand law. You exist because we allow it. You breathe because we do not stop you." The other Zephyrians spread out around the landing field. They moved like trained soldiers, checking corners and watching for threats that did not exist. Their weapons were always ready. Jake realized these were not tax collectors or bureaucrats. These were warriors looking for a fight. Lucy had followed the sound of the ships. Her curiosity was stronger than her mother's warnings to stay close to home. She crept through the wheat until she could see the landing field. The strange creatures fascinated her. She had never seen aliens before except in picture books. The little girl stepped out of the wheat field and walked toward the ships. She was not afraid. Children often are not afraid when they should be. To Lucy, this was just something new and interesting happening in her quiet world. Jake saw Lucy approaching and felt his blood turn cold. "Stay back," he called to her. "Go home to your parents right now." But Lucy kept walking. She wanted to see the aliens up close. She wanted to know what they looked like and where they came from. Her 8-year-old mind could not understand the danger. One of the Zephyrian soldiers noticed the small human approaching. His weapon came up fast, the barrel glowing with building energy. Fear and training took over his mind. To him, any moving target was a potential threat. "No!" Jake shouted, but it was too late. The plasma bolt hit Lucy in the chest. The energy weapon designed for killing armored soldiers struck a small girl in a simple dress. She fell to the ground without making a sound, her body smoking from the terrible heat. The silence that followed seemed to last forever. Jake stared at Lucy's still form, his mind refusing to accept what had just happened. His security officers stood frozen in shock and horror. Lord Commander Vextar looked down at the dead child with no more concern than if someone had stepped on a bug. "Clumsy," he said to the soldier who had fired. "But humans breed quickly. There are always more." The Zephyrians laughed as they walked back to their ships. They stepped around Lucy's body like it was just another piece of debris on the ground. Within minutes, their ships lifted off and disappeared into the sky, leaving only burned earth and the smell of death behind them. Jake ran to Lucy and knelt beside her small body. He had seen death before in his military days, but never like this, never so senseless and cruel. His hands shook as he checked for signs of life he knew he would not find. Maria's scream cut through the air like a knife. She had come looking for her daughter and found the worst thing any parent could find. Carlos was right behind her, his face turning white with shock and grief. Jake held them back from touching Lucy's burned body, though it broke his heart to do it. He needed to preserve the scene. He needed evidence of what the Zephyrians had done. Someone had to pay for this. Someone had to answer for the murder of an innocent child. As he activated his emergency transmitter to send a message to Earth, Jake Sullivan made himself a promise. The galaxy would know what happened here today. They would know that Lucy Martinez had died for no reason other than alien cruelty and contempt. He had no idea that his message would change the fate of every world in known space. The emergency message from New Haven Colony reached Earth 3 days after Lucy Martinez died. It traveled through deep space communication networks, bouncing from relay station to relay station until it arrived at the Terran Defense Command, headquarters in Geneva. Admiral Helen Carter was reviewing supply reports when her aide knocked on her office door. Lieutenant Dan Cooper entered with a worried look on his face. He carried a datapad that seemed to weigh more than it should. "Admiral, we have an urgent transmission from the outer colonies," Cooper said. His voice was tight with controlled emotion. "You need to see this immediately." Carter looked up from her paperwork. She was a woman in her 50s with short silver hair and sharp blue eyes that had seen too much of war. She had commanded fleets in the border wars against pirate groups. But those conflicts had been small compared to what the galaxy might throw at humanity someday. "Put it on the main screen," Carter said. The holographic display activated, showing Jake Sullivan's tired face. Behind him, Carter could see the simple buildings of a farming colony. Sullivan looked like he had not slept in days. "This is Captain Jake Sullivan, New Haven Colony Security Chief, transmitting on emergency channels," Sullivan began. 3 days ago, Zephyrian Empire forces landed at our colony without warning or provocation. During their visit, they murdered an 8-year-old girl named Lucy Martinez. Carter felt her stomach drop, but she kept her expression calm. She had learned long ago not to show emotion in front of her staff until she knew all the facts. sending you complete video records of the incident," Sullivan continued. The Zephyrians showed no remorse. They treated the killing like it was nothing important. They laughed as they left. The video file began playing. Carter watched as little Lucy Martinez walked toward the alien ships with innocent curiosity. She saw the Zephyrian soldier raise his weapon. She watched the plasma bolt strike the child down. But what made Carter's blood boil was what came next. The Zephyrians stepping around Lucy's body like she was garbage. Their laughter as they boarded their ships. The casual way Lord Commander Vextar dismissed the murder of a child. Lieutenant Cooper had turned pale while watching the video. Several other officers had gathered around the screen, drawn by the urgent transmission. Carter could hear angry whispers behind her. "Get me President Hayes on a secure line," Carter ordered. "Also contact General Thompson and Secretary Ross. Emergency meeting in 1 hour." Cooper nodded and hurried out of the room. Carter played the video again, studying every detail. She had seen combat footage before, but this was different. This was not war. This was not even a fight. This was the casual murder of a child by creatures who thought human life meant nothing. 1 hour later, Carter stood in the White House Situation Room. President William Hayes sat at the head of the table, his face grim. General Frank Thompson, head of the Space Marine Corps, paced back and forth like a caged animal. Secretary of Defense Elizabeth Ross sat quietly, but Carter could see the anger burning in her eyes. "Show them," Hayes said simply. Carter activated the room's display system and played the video from New Haven. The room fell silent as they watched Lucy Martinez die. When the Zephyrians began laughing, General Thompson stopped pacing and slammed, his fist on the table. "Animals," Thompson growled. "They're worse than animals. Animals kill for food or territory. These things killed for sport." Secretary Ross leaned forward. "We should try diplomatic channels first. File a formal protest with the Galactic Council. Demand an investigation and reparations." "They killed our child," President Hayes said quietly. His voice was calm, but everyone in the room could hear the steel beneath it. "They murdered one of our own and laughed about it. There will be no diplomacy." Carter had expected this response. She had known Hayes for 10 years, and she had never seen him back down from a fight when innocent people were threatened. "What are our options, Admiral?" Hayes asked. Carter had been preparing for this question since she first saw the video. "We can mobilize the Terra Defense Fleet within 72 hours. 12 heavy cruisers, 30 destroyers, and support vessels. Full combat deployment." General Thompson smiled grimly. "The first expeditionary force can be ready in the same time frame. 10,000 Marines with full combat gear." Secretary Ross looked concerned. "The Zephyrian Empire has ruled this sector for 300 years. Their fleet outnumbers ours 10 to 1. This could be suicide?" "Could be," Hayes agreed. "But they don't know what we're really capable of. For the past 20 years, we've been letting the galaxy think we're just another primitive species with basic technology." This was true. Earth's military had been developing advanced weapons and tactics in secret. The Quantum Torpedo Project, AI-assisted targeting systems, powered armor for ground troops, experimental shield technology. The galaxy thought humans were still using chemical rockets and projectile weapons. Carter pulled up classified files on her tablet. "Project Thunder is ready for deployment. Our new quantum weapons can punch through any known shield system. Project Lightning gives us tactical coordination the galaxy has never seen." "What about intelligence?" Hayes asked. "Dr. Kevin Stewart has complete files on Zephyrian military doctrine and biology," Carter replied. "They rely on intimidation and overwhelming force against primitive opponents. They haven't faced a real challenge in generations." General Thompson stopped pacing and looked directly at the president. "Sir, we can hurt them. We can hurt them badly. The question is whether we're prepared to accept the consequences." Hayes was quiet for a long moment, staring at the frozen image of Lucy Martinez on the screen. The little girl's face looked so peaceful, as if she was just sleeping instead of dead. "They made their choice when they killed that child," Hayes said finally. "Now we make ours. Admiral Carter, begin fleet mobilization immediately." General Thompson, prepare the Marines for deployment. Secretary Ross, draft a message to the Galactic Council explaining our actions. What should the message say? Ross asked. That humanity is done being ignored, Hayes replied. That we will not tolerate the murder of our children. That the Zephyrian Empire is about to learn what happens when you wake up a sleeping giant. Over the next 72 hours, the largest military mobilization in human history began. The Terra Defense Fleet emerged from hidden bases on the far side of the moon. Advanced warships that no alien had ever seen moved into formation. Admiral Peter Brooks took command of the First Strike Fleet aboard the flagship TDS Vengeance. Captain Lisa Morgan led the Second Assault Group with fast destroyers designed for hit-and-run tactics. Colonel Ryan Davis prepared his Marines for ground combat with weapons the Zephyrians had never encountered. The mobilization was kept secret from Earth's civilian population, but word began to spread through the military. Every soldier, sailor, and pilot knew why they were being deployed. They had all seen the video of Lucy Martinez. They all knew what the Zephyrians had done. Dr. Stewart worked around the clock, preparing detailed intelligence reports on Zephyrian military capabilities and weaknesses. He had spent years studying alien species, but this was the first time his research would be used for war. Their armor is designed to stop primitive projectile weapons, Stewart explained to a room full of military commanders. Our plasma rifles will cut through it like paper. Their shields are optimized against energy weapons they've encountered before. Our quantum torpedoes use completely different physics. Admiral Carter studied the tactical displays showing human fleet movements. Everything was proceeding according to plan, but she felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. This would be humanity's first major military action against a galactic power. Win or lose, nothing would ever be the same. Admiral, Lieutenant Cooper said, entering her office with another data pad. Final fleet roster is complete. All ships report ready for combat operations. Carter nodded. Signal the fleet. We jump to hyperspace in 6 hours. As the lieutenant left, Carter looked out her office window at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Zephyrians thought they had gotten away with murder. They thought humans were too weak and primitive to seek justice for one dead child. They were about to discover how wrong they were. The sleeping giant was awake, and it was very, very angry. 6 months after the fall of the Zephyrian Empire, the galaxy was a very different place. News of humanity's victory had reached every inhabited world, and the effects were still spreading like ripples in a vast ocean. Ambassador Grace Johnson stood before the Galactic Council on the neutral world of Nexus Prime. She was a small woman with gray hair and kind eyes, but every alien representative in the chamber knew she spoke for the species that had toppled the mightiest empire in known space. The Terran Federation presents the following terms for galactic peace, Johnson announced, reading from a prepared statement. Complete dismantling of all Zephyrian military forces. Reparations to every species oppressed by the Empire. An adoption of the Universal Rights Charter, protecting all sentient beings from harm. The council chamber erupted in discussion. Delegates from hundreds of worlds whispered among themselves, translating Johnson's words into their native languages. Many of them had been slaves or tributaries of the Zephyrian Empire just months ago. Council Chairman Velthar, an elderly alien with blue skin and 6 arms, called for order. Ambassador Johnson, these terms are extensive. The Galactic Council has never before imposed such requirements on a fallen empire. The Galactic Council has never before dealt with an empire that murdered children for sport, Johnson replied, calmly. Humanity's terms are non-negotiable. In the months since Emperor Vexkoth's capture, human forces had uncovered the true scope of Zephyrian crimes. Mass graves on dozens of worlds. Slave camps where entire species had been worked to death. Records showing that the Empire had destroyed civilizations for no reason other than entertainment. Captain Nathan Bell had become famous across the galaxy for his liberation of the prison camps. His Marines had freed over 1 million sentient beings from Zephyrian slavery, and the rescued prisoners spoke of humans as heroes sent from the stars. The humans saved us when no one else would, testified Krixtal, a former slave from the mining world of Durnka. They asked for nothing in return except that we remember the name Lucy Martinez. That name had indeed become known throughout the galaxy. Lucy Martinez, the 8-year-old girl whose murder had awakened humanity's righteous fury. Her story was told on 1,000 worlds, translated into hundreds of languages. Children who had never seen a human knew her name. On Earth, President Hayes addressed the planet's population from the Rose Garden of the White House. The man who had ordered humanity's first interstellar war looked tired but satisfied as he spoke to cameras broadcasting around the world. 6 months ago, the Zephyrian Empire murdered one of our children and thought there would be no consequences, Hayes said. Today, that empire no longer exists. Justice has been served not just for Lucy Martinez, but for countless innocent beings across the galaxy. The war had cost humanity dearly. 300 human soldiers and sailors had died in the fighting, and their names were read aloud at memorial services on every world. But their sacrifice had freed billions of sentient beings from oppression and changed the course of galactic history. Admiral Helen Carter had been promoted to Supreme Commander of Terran Defense Forces, overseeing humanity's new role as a galactic power. Her forces now patrolled former Zephyrian territories, ensuring that liberated worlds remained free. "We're not conquerors," Carter explained to her staff officers. "We're peacekeepers. Our job is to make sure nothing like the Zephyrian Empire can ever rise again." The technological gap between humans and other species had become even more apparent in the months after the war. Earth's quantum weapons, AI-assisted tactics, and powered armor made human forces nearly invincible in combat. But humanity used this advantage responsibly, protecting the weak rather than dominating them. Dr. Kevin Stewart had established research stations throughout former Zephyrian space, studying alien technology and biology to better understand humanity's new neighbors. His teams worked alongside scientists from dozens of species, sharing knowledge freely. The Zephyrians hoarded their technology, used it to maintain power over others, Stewart noted in his reports. "Humanity shares knowledge because we believe all species deserve the chance to advance and prosper." On New Haven Colony, a monument had been erected where Lucy Martinez died. The simple stone marker bore her image and the words, "One child's death changed the fate of 1 billion worlds." Visitors came from across the galaxy to pay their respects to the little girl who had become a symbol of hope. Jake Sullivan, still the colony's security chief, often stood guard at the memorial. He had aged considerably in the past months, the weight of history heavy on his shoulders. But when children from other species came to visit, he always made sure to tell them Lucy's story. "She was just a normal little girl," Sullivan would say. "She liked to run through the wheat fields and ask questions about everything she saw. She wasn't special because she was human. She was special because she was innocent, and no one should die for being innocent." The trials of Zephyrian war criminals had been broadcast across the galaxy. Emperor Vexkoth himself faced charges for crimes against sentience, genocide, and the murder of Lucy Martinez. The ancient ruler who had once seemed godlike now sat in a human prison cell awaiting judgment. Lord Commander Vextar, the officer who had laughed while stepping over Lucy's body, was among the first to be sentenced. His execution was carried out on New Haven Colony, witnessed by representatives from every species the Zephyrians had oppressed. "Justice delayed is not justice denied," Admiral Brooks said at the execution. "The galaxy remembers what you did to an innocent child. The galaxy will not forget." The economic changes following the Empire's collapse were equally dramatic. Zephyrian trade routes that had enriched only the ruling class were now open to all species. Worlds that had been strip-mined for tribute were receiving aid to rebuild their ecosystems. Ambassador Johnson worked tirelessly with the Galactic Council to establish new trade agreements and mutual defense treaties. Humanity's advanced technology was shared with species that had been held back by Zephyrian oppression. "We're not asking anyone to become human," Johnson explained to skeptical delegates. "We're asking everyone to become better than they were." The Universal Rights Charter that humanity proposed was revolutionary for galactic politics. It established fundamental protections for all sentient beings, regardless of species or technological level. Most importantly, it made the targeting of children a crime punishable by any civilized world. Article 1 of the Charter read simply, Every child of every species on every world has the right to grow up safe from harm. This right shall not be violated under any circumstances. Not every species supported the new order. Some aliens complained that humanity had gained too much influence too quickly. Others worried that Earth's military might would eventually be turned against them. But these voices were overwhelmed by the gratitude of species that had been freed from Zephyrian oppression. The Clarnti, whose homeworld had been enslaved for generations, named their capital city Lucy's Hope in honor of the human child. The Velkari, survivors of a species the Empire had nearly exterminated, established a shrine to Lucy Martinez on their last remaining colony. General Frank Thompson, now retired from active duty, visited schools across Earth to speak about the war and its meaning. He always ended his presentations the same way. "We didn't fight because we were stronger than the Zephyrians," Thompson would tell the children. "We fought because Lucy Martinez deserved better than a galaxy that would let her killers walk away," laughing. Every child deserves that kind of protection. 1 year after Lucy's death, a ceremony was held on New Haven Colony to dedicate a new school built in her memory. Children from 20 different species attended the opening, their families having traveled across the galaxy to be there. Maria and Carlos Martinez, Lucy's parents, spoke at the ceremony. They had spent the year working with refugee organizations, helping families displaced by the war to find new homes. "Our daughter died because some people thought human children didn't matter," Maria said, her voice strong despite her tears. "Now every child in the galaxy matters a little more because of her." President Hayes, now serving his second term, reflected on how much had changed in just 1 year. Humanity had gone from being an ignored frontier species to the most influential civilization in the galaxy. But with that influence came responsibility. "Power without compassion is tyranny," Hayes said in his State of the Union address. "We saw what that looked like under the Zephyrian Empire. Humanity must never make the same mistakes." The new galactic order was not perfect. There were still conflicts between species, still worlds where injustice flourished. But for the first time in centuries, there was hope that things could get better. Admiral Carter often stood in her office looking up at the stars through her window. Somewhere out there, human ships patrolled the space lanes, keeping them safe for merchant vessels and refugee transports. Somewhere out there, children of a dozen species played together on worlds that had once known only fear. "We kept our promise, Lucy," Carter whispered to the night sky. "The galaxy remembers your name." And indeed it did. On 1,000 worlds, in 100 languages, parents would tell their children the story of Lucy Martinez, how one little girl's death had awakened a sleeping giant. News of the human victory at Kethmore reached every corner of the galaxy within days. The Zephyrian Empire, which had ruled through fear for 3 centuries, suddenly seemed vulnerable. On 100 worlds, oppressed species whispered about the humans who had done the impossible. Emperor Vexkoth himself, supreme ruler of the Zephyrian Empire, received the reports in his throne room on the capital world of Zephyr Prime. He was ancient even by Zephyrian standards, with scales that had turned almost black with age and eyes that glowed like yellow fire. "Lord Admiral Crox defeated?" Vexkoth hissed in disbelief. "His entire fleet destroyed by primitives?" General Sektar, the Emperor's military advisor, bowed low before answering. "The reports are confirmed, my Emperor. The humans possess weapons we have never encountered. Their ships move with unnatural coordination. Their ground forces cannot be stopped." Vexkoth rose from his crystal throne, his massive form casting shadows across the marble floor. "Assemble the Grand Fleet. Every battleship, every cruiser, every fighter. I will personally lead the destruction of this human infestation." The Grand Fleet was the pride of the Zephyrian Empire. 500 warships of the most advanced design, weapons capable of destroying entire planets, shields that had never been penetrated. It had not been fully mobilized in over a century, but the Emperor's rage demanded nothing less than total human annihilation. Meanwhile, the human fleet had not been idle after their victory at Kethmore. Admiral Brooks knew the Zephyrians would respond with overwhelming force, so he prepared accordingly. Captain Nathan Bell led humanitarian missions to liberate Zephyrian prison camps throughout the sector. Bell's Marines found horrors beyond imagination in the alien labor camps. Thousands of sentient beings from dozens of species worked to death in mining operations and weapon factories. The survivors spoke of the humans as saviors, calling them the awakened ones who had brought hope to the hopeless. Document everything, Bell ordered his troops as they evacuated the camps. The galaxy needs to see what the Zephyrian Empire really is. Captain Morgan's destroyer squadron struck military installations across 3 star systems using hit-and-run tactics that left the enemy confused and demoralized. Her ships would appear without warning, destroy their targets, and vanish before reinforcements could arrive. The Zephyrians are terrified, Morgan reported to Admiral Brooks. Their commanders are making mistakes, pulling back from positions they could easily defend. They don't know how to fight an enemy they can't intimidate. Colonel Davis expanded his marine operations, liberating entire worlds from Zephyrian occupation. His powered armor units moved through enemy defenses like unstoppable machines, and word of their victories spread faster than the Empire could suppress it. But the humans' greatest weapon was not their technology. It was their message. Every liberated prisoner, every freed world, every defeated Zephyrian commander heard the same words. This is for Lucy Martinez, age 8, of New Haven Colony. The name became a rallying cry across the galaxy. Oppressed species who had never heard of humans began to rise up, inspired by the story of the child whose death had awakened Earth's fury. The Zephyrian Empire found itself fighting rebellions on 50 worlds simultaneously. On Earth, President Hayes addressed the United Nations as reports of victory poured in from across the galaxy. The assembly hall was packed with representatives from every nation, all united in support of humanity's righteous war. We did not choose this conflict, Hayes declared. We wanted only to live in peace and raise our children safely, but when the Zephyrian Empire murdered Lucy Martinez, they learned that humanity will not tolerate the slaughter of innocents. Admiral Carter coordinated the war effort from her command center in Geneva, using quantum communication links to stay in constant contact with the fleet. Her tactical displays showed human forces winning battles across a front spanning hundreds of light years. The Zephyrians are collapsing faster than we expected, Carter reported to the president. Their military doctrine depends on fear and intimidation. When those fail, they don't know how to adapt. Dr. Stewart analyzed captured Zephyrian technology and was amazed by what he found. Their weapons are powerful but crude. Their tactics are centuries out of date. They've grown soft from fighting primitive opponents for too long. 3 weeks after the Battle of Kethmore, long-range sensors detected the approaching Zephyrian Grand Fleet. 500 ships moving in perfect formation, their weapons charging for the final battle that would decide humanity's fate. Admiral Brooks gathered his commanders aboard the TDS Vengeance to plan their response. The human fleet had grown to 60 ships with reinforcements from Earth, but they were still outnumbered 8-1. The Emperor himself is commanding their fleet, Intelligence Officer Commander Walsh reported. Vexkoth has ruled the Empire for 2,000 years. He's never lost a battle. There's always a first time, Colonel Davis replied grimly. His Marines had been reinforced as well, with 20,000 troops now ready for the final assault. Captain Morgan studied the tactical projections with concern. Even with our technological advantage, those are terrible odds. If we lose this battle, Earth is defenseless. Admiral Brooks was quiet for a long moment, looking at the holographic display showing both fleets approaching each other. Then he smiled with cold determination. They're expecting us to meet them head-on, fleet against fleet, he said. That's how they've always fought. That's how they've always won. But we're not going to fight their kind of battle. Brooks outlined his plan to the assembled commanders. Instead of a traditional fleet engagement, the humans would use their superior speed and coordination to strike at multiple targets simultaneously. While the main fleet drew the enemy's attention, Marine units would assault Zephyr Prime directly. Cut off the head and the snake dies, Brooks explained. Take out their Emperor and command structure and their fleet will collapse. The plan was incredibly risky. If it failed, Humanity would face certain destruction, but it was also the kind of bold, innovative thinking that had allowed humans to survive and thrive against impossible odds throughout their history. 2 days later, the human and Zephyrian fleets met in the empty space between star systems. Emperor Vexkoth opened communications from his flagship Eternal Dominion, his massive form filling the view screen. "I am Vexkoth, Emperor of the Zephyrian Empire," he announced. "You have killed my warriors and freed my slaves. For these crimes, your entire species will be exterminated." Admiral Brooks responded calmly. "I am Admiral Peter Brooks of the Terran Defense Fleet. We come seeking justice for Lucy Martinez, age 8, murdered by your soldiers. Surrender now and face trial for war crimes, or be destroyed." Vexkoth laughed, a sound like grinding stone. "You face the Grand Fleet, human. 500 ships that have conquered 1,000 worlds. Your pathetic vessels will burn like candles in the void." "We'll see," Brooks replied, and cut the transmission. The battle began when the TDS Vengeance fired the opening shot, a quantum torpedo that struck the Zephyrian flagship's shields with devastating force. The Emperor's ship shuddered under the yaoi impact, its energy barriers flickering, but this was just a distraction. While the main human fleet engaged the enemy in a running battle, Captain Morgan's destroyers slipped around the Zephyrian flanks, using their superior speed. Strike craft loaded with Marines began the dangerous journey toward Zephyr Prime. The space battle raged for hours. Human ships darted between the massive Zephyrian battleships like wolves among elephants, striking with their advanced weapons and vanishing before the enemy could respond. The AI-assisted tactical network allowed perfect coordination, even in the chaos of combat. Emperor Vexkoth watched in growing fury as his supposedly invincible fleet took heavy losses. Human quantum torpedoes tore through shields that had protected Zephyrian ships for centuries. Enemy vessels moved with impossible precision, anticipating his every tactical move. "How are they doing this?" he demanded of his tactical officer. "Their ships are outnumbered 5-1. "They fight like a single organism, my emperor," the officer replied in terror. "Every ship seems to know what every other ship will do." While the fleet battle continued, Colonel Davis led his assault force toward the surface of Zephyr Prime. Zephyrian fighters and defense platforms tried to stop them, but human destroyers cleared a path through the enemy defenses. The Marines landed directly in the capital city, their assault pods smashing through the roof of the Imperial Palace. Powered armor troops poured out into corridors that had not seen combat in 1,000 years. Zephyrian palace guards fired desperately at the advancing humans, but their weapons barely scratched the advanced armor. Davis led his troops toward the throne room, following intelligence maps that showed the palace layout in perfect detail. Back in space, Admiral Brooks watched the tactical display as both parts of his plan unfolded. The fleet battle was going better than expected, with human ships destroying Zephyrian vessels at a rate of 3-1. But the real objective was on the planet below. "Colonel Davis reports his forces are approaching the throne room," Commander Walsh announced. "Zephyrian resistance is collapsing." Emperor Vexkoth tried to flee his palace as human Marines stormed through his defenses, but there was nowhere to run. The human fleet jumped into hyperspace exactly 72 hours after President Hayes gave the order. 43 warships disappeared from Earth's solar system in flashes of blue light, heading toward the Zephyrian Empire's stronghold systems. Admiral Peter Brooks stood on the bridge of the TDS Vengeance, watching the swirling colors of hyperspace through the main view screen. He was a tall man with graying hair and scars on his hands from years of military service. This was the largest fleet he had ever commanded, and possibly the most important mission in human history. "Admiral," called Captain Roy Allen, the ship's navigation officer. "We'll drop out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kethmore system in 6 hours. Brooks nodded. Kethmore was the heart of Zephyrian military power in this sector. Intelligence reports showed at least 50 enemy warships stationed there, along with orbital defense platforms and ground installations. It would be humanity's first real test against a galactic military force. "Signal the fleet," Brooks ordered. "All ships prepare for combat operations. This is not a drill." Throughout the human fleet, soldiers and sailors made final preparations. Captain Lisa Morgan walked through the corridors of her destroyer TDS Lightning, checking on her crew. The ship was smaller than the heavy cruisers but faster and more maneuverable. Her job was to hit the enemy hard and get out before they could respond. "How are the quantum torpedoes?" Morgan asked her weapons officer, Lieutenant Ben Clark. "All tubes loaded and ready, Captain," Clark replied. "The new warheads should punch through anything the Zephyrians have." Morgan smiled grimly. The quantum torpedoes were humanity's secret weapon, developed in underground laboratories on Mars. Instead of using simple explosive force, they disrupted the molecular bonds of whatever they hit. A single torpedo could tear apart a battleship's hull like tissue paper. In the Marine transport ships, Colonel Ryan Davis inspected his troops, 10,000 soldiers in powered armor that made them look like walking tanks. Each suit was equipped with energy shields, enhanced strength, and weapons that could level buildings. "Remember your training," Davis told his company commanders. "The Zephyrians are bigger and stronger than humans, but our equipment gives us the advantage. Stay coordinated, watch your sectors, and don't give them time to react." The Marines had trained for months on mock-ups of Zephyrian facilities. They knew the enemy's tactics, their weaknesses, their blind spots. Most importantly, they knew why they were fighting. Every Marine had seen the video of Lucy Martinez. Back on the TDS Vengeance, Admiral Brooks received reports from his intelligence officer, Commander Janet Walsh. She had been studying Zephyrian military doctrine for years, preparing for exactly this kind of conflict. "The enemy fleet at Kethmore follows standard Imperial formation," Walsh explained. "Large battleships in the center, smaller vessels on the flanks. They rely on massive firepower and intimidation, rather than tactical flexibility." "Weaknesses?" Brooks asked. "They've never faced an opponent who could match their technology," Walsh replied. "Their formations are designed to crush primitive enemies, not fight an equal opponent. If we can disrupt their command structure, their individual ships will have trouble coordinating." Lieutenant Commander Amy Chen worked at her station nearby, monitoring the fleet's AI-assisted tactical network. This was another human innovation the galaxy had never seen. Every ship in the fleet was connected through quantum communication links, allowing instant coordination across vast distances. "All ships report green status on the tactical network," Chen announced. "Response time between fleet elements is less than 1 second. This meant human ships could work together like parts of a single organism. When one ship detected a target, every other ship knew about it immediately. When a commander made a tactical decision, it was instantly shared across the entire fleet. The Zephyrian Empire had no idea such technology existed. Dr. Kevin Stewart had traveled with the fleet to provide real-time intelligence analysis. He sat in his small laboratory aboard the TDS Vengeance, reviewing everything humanity knew about their enemy. The Zephyrians were an old race, with a civilization spanning thousands of years. They had built their empire through conquest and intimidation, crushing dozens of younger species. Their military doctrine was based on overwhelming force and psychological warfare. They expect their enemies to surrender when faced with superior numbers, Stewart noted in his reports. They have not fought a major war in over 2 centuries. Their tactics are designed for suppressing rebellions, not fighting a determined opponent. Most importantly, the Zephyrians had grown arrogant. They believed their technology was the best in the galaxy. They thought no primitive species could challenge their military might. This arrogance would be their downfall. 6 hours later, the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kethmore system. Alarms immediately began sounding on Zephyrian ships as their sensors detected the approaching vessels. Lord Admiral Crox commanded the Zephyrian defense fleet from his massive battleship Dominant Fang. He was an old warrior with dark scales and yellow eyes that had seen 100 conquered worlds. When his sensor officer reported human ships in the system, Crox laughed. "Humans?" he hissed in amusement. "Send 2 squadrons to deal with them. Make it quick." Crox had read reports about human military capability. Primitive chemical rockets, simple projectile weapons, basic armor that could barely stop plasma fire. He expected the human fleet to surrender as soon as they saw Zephyrian warships approaching. 24 Zephyrian cruisers moved toward the human fleet in perfect formation. Their hulls gleamed with polished armor, and their weapons glowed with building energy. They had destroyed 100 enemy fleets over the centuries. Admiral Brooks watched the approaching enemy ships on his tactical display. The Zephyrians were moving exactly as predicted, following standard Imperial doctrine. They clearly expected an easy victory. "All ships, this is Admiral Brooks," he announced over the fleet communication system. "Today we fight for Lucy Martinez, age 8, of New Haven Colony. Today we show the galaxy that humanity will not be ignored." The first quantum torpedo launched from the TDS Vengeance struck a Zephyrian cruiser amidships. The enemy vessel simply disintegrated, its molecular structure disrupted by weapons technology the aliens had never encountered. In seconds, a ship that had terrorized primitive worlds for decades was reduced to expanding clouds of debris. The Zephyrian formation scattered in confusion as human destroyers appeared among them like ghosts. Captain Morgan's TDS Lightning materialized directly behind an enemy battleship and fired its full torpedo spread. The massive Zephyrian vessel broke apart under the assault, its crew dying before they understood what had happened. Human ships moved with impossible coordination, striking and vanishing before the enemy could respond. The AI-assisted tactical network allowed split-second timing that made the fleet fight like a single weapon. Lord Admiral Crox watched in growing horror as his squadrons were torn apart. Human weapons cut through Zephyrian shields like they were not there. Human ships moved faster than anything in his fleet. Worst of all, the humans fought with a cold precision that terrified him. "All ships, fall back to defensive formation," Crox ordered. "Request immediate reinforcements from the inner system." But it was too late. The human fleet had already shattered his outer defenses. Admiral Brooks had planned this assault for months, studying every detail of Zephyrian tactics. He knew exactly where they would be weak. "Begin Phase 2, Brooks ordered. "All marine transports proceed to landing zones. Destroy their ground installations." Colonel Davis led his Marines in assault pods toward the surface of Kethmore Prime, the system's main military base. Zephyrian fighters tried to intercept them, but human destroyers provided covering fire that swept the enemy from the sky. The Marines landed hard in the middle of the main Zephyrian command complex. Their powered armor absorbed the impact as they smashed through concrete walls and energy barriers. Zephyrian soldiers fired plasma rifles that barely scratched the advanced human armor. "Move fast, hit hard," Davis ordered over his radio. "Take the command center before they can call for help." The battle for Kethmore lasted only 6 hours. When it was over, the entire Zephyrian defense fleet was destroyed or captured. The orbital defense platforms were smoking ruins. The ground installations had surrendered after their commanders saw human Marines tear through their defenses like paper. Lord Admiral Crox found himself a prisoner aboard the TDS Vengeance, standing before Admiral Brooks in shackles. The proud, Zephyrian commander who had crushed dozens of worlds could barely believe what had happened. "Impossible," Crox whispered. "You are primitives. Your weapons are crude. Your ships are weak." Brooks looked at the defeated alien with cold eyes. "We were hiding our true strength. We wanted to be left alone. We wanted peace." "Then why attack us?" Crox demanded. Brooks activated a holographic display showing the video from New Haven Colony. Crox watched as his fellow Zephyrians murdered Lucy Martinez and laughed about it. "Because you killed one of our children," Brooks said simply. "And now you're going to pay for it." Word of humanity's victory spread across the galaxy within hours. The Zephyrian Empire, which had seemed unbeatable for centuries,